Hello, Flat Earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. Here's a picture of Mount Everest, which I think is a great example of the contradictions that we have to ignore when it comes to having a faith in a physically impossible heliocentric globe-Earth model that really is nothing more than pseudoscience when it comes to defining our reality or our place in space, as it were. And it's also useful to highlight the difference between making calculations based on a model and measurable proof that can be obtained from something that we can confirm physically exists on this Earth. Now, okay, I've never been to Mount Everest, but I'm pretty sure it's there. It's been confirmed by a large number of independent people who have been there or have maybe even climbed to the summit. We can rest assured that Mount Everest is there, it's on our Earth. And there are various things that we know about it. There are facts that we can verify and do so with physical measurements. They become measurable proof. For example, we know that it's about 9 kilometers high, just under 9 kilometers. And the temperature there can be as low as minus 60 degrees centigrade or about minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit. This is something that can be confirmed with real measurements, proper scientific physical measurements, i.e. measurable proof. But when it comes to having faith, and that is exactly what it is, it's just faith, a belief in a model, or the heliocentric model of the globe Earth, we are given something like this, an illustration of a globe Earth tilting. And the reason I've highlighted axial tilt here is because just now we mentioned that Mount Everest is cold, and we know that the higher up you go, the colder it gets. So it's strange because although we would be getting closer to the sun, it gets colder. Of course, that's scientifically explained by the atmosphere thinning out and things like that. There are reasons that it gets cold as we gain elevation. It's not because we're getting closer to the sun. It's all understood. That's fine. But what we have here is the June solstice and the December solstice, and an illustration that represents the change of seasons, which we are told is caused by axial tilt in this heliocentric globe Earth model. And that's all we have, is an illustration. We have calculations which appear to make sense and appear to work and give us the impression that we have this working model of the globe Earth. And a lot of people will say, well, it's the best model we've got, so I'm going to believe in that until something better comes along. But this is not the same kind of measurable proof that you can get from measuring the height of Mount Everest or the temperature on Mount Everest. So we are told here that it's the Earth's axial tilt, the globe Earth's axial tilt in an elliptical orbit around the sun, that gives us the seasons. So at different points throughout the year, different parts of the Earth are essentially closer to the sun, or we are told the sunlight is more direct to those points on Earth that are experiencing summer. Now, when you really think about it, though, we've got this sun which is supposed to be many, many, many times larger than the globe Earth. So the idea of getting more direct sunlight is just ridiculous anyway, because wherever you are on one half of this globe Earth, you're going to get lots and lots of sunlight from a much more massive sun, with the sunlight apparently travelling in parallel lines. This is again something that cannot really be confirmed. In fact, science doesn't know whether to describe light as waves or particles or something else. So what we have is this idea of axial tilt, which has never been demonstrated. It cannot be photographed or filmed. All we have are illustrations. And really this, what would be on a cosmic scale a slight difference, this 23.4 degrees of tilt, really shouldn't make a difference compared to the massive size of the sun and its alleged 93 million miles distance from us. So again, this is just an explanation to fit an assumed model. Again, we've got the argument that the globe is a working model. But really it's not, because all we have are compartmentalized explanations, that none of which have any form of measurable proof. It might seem silly to demand that someone go to the sun with a tape measure, but what we've done with Mount Everest is gone there and physically measured the height. Okay, trigonometry might have been used, but it's based on a physical reality that can be confirmed in many, many other ways. Also the temperature, this is something that we can physically do. We can go to Mount Everest and we can physically measure the temperature. So that is measurable proof. Whereas what we have here on this illustration, which it says is not to scale, is just that, an illustration, something we have to imagine. And of course we are given the impression that we are smart if we have the ability to imagine this in 3D from an external point of view. But the whole crux of the issue here, when it comes to making observations on the Earth and then converting those observations into this kind of orthographic view, is that, simply put, perspective, the perspective of the observer on Earth, becomes or is translated into an imaginary curve. And of course then, to engineer this model, we have to have some kind of external force which allows us to stick to what would otherwise be a physical impossibility, the outside of a sphere. And so when it comes to the idea that the globe is going around this massive sun, these distances and the speeds, 1,000 miles an hour at the equator or 66,000 miles an hour whizzing around the sun, would appear to be true, and they work for the model itself, but all they are calculations of the model. So of course it's necessary to say that the Earth spins at 1,000 miles an hour because of the model itself, but there is no measurable proof. Throughout the entire history of scientific exploration, there is no measurable proof. Of course we can talk about frames of reference, and it's also understood that if you're already moving and it's all very smooth, then you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But something that's often talked about is linear conservation of momentum. Someone will say, oh, imagine you're on a train. So yes, it's known, and it's perfectly acceptable that there's no difference between being stationary or moving at a constant speed without acceleration. But the one thing that's ignored or forgotten when it comes to using this example of being on a moving train is that the Earth is not going along in a straight line, and it's a sphere. So it's not conservation of momentum in a linear fashion. It's constant acceleration of a spinning sphere. So that direction is constantly changing. This is again one of those contradictions that we have to ignore in order to accept the heliocentric model as a working model without any measurable proof whatsoever. And there are alternative explanations. No, we cannot prove that the sun or the moon or the earth is doing or not doing a particular thing. But we can also understand how this heliocentric model has been constructed and created as an illustration of the observations that we make here on Earth. So this axial tilt of 23.4 degrees of the Earth, yes, it makes sense in a model, but it defies all real-world physics. So, yes, you can have this compartmentalized explanation, but that doesn't fit with our physical reality in so many ways. And again, we don't have any measurable proof of spin, curvature, tilt, orbit, and all that. Yeah? There is a vast, vast difference between going to somewhere like Mount Everest and making physical measurements that can be confirmed. Now, just another small point is that, again, you know, the higher we get, the colder it gets. So what's the sun actually doing? It's heating up the ground, but not this higher elevation. Whereas here, we are given this impression that being closer to the sun on parts of the Earth makes it hotter. So that's a contradiction in itself as well, that goes against the real physics of the understanding we have that the rise in altitude or elevation actually gives us colder weather rather than being hotter because we're closer to the sun. It's a silly little thing, but it's just a contradiction that you can use to think about. So if you're new to this whole flat earth, globe earth debate, and you're being given examples and illustrations of a model, a working model, and all these explanations, just keep in mind the difference between a calculation of a model and a physical measurement. So you also have to realize that there is no need for an alternative model. We can make alternative illustrations. We can illustrate a flat earth. But again, to ask where's the edge is as silly as asking, have you been all around the earth to Antarctica and back on yourself? Nobody on this earth knows the truth. So nobody should be promoting a particular model as our reality. The simple truth of the matter is that we don't know. We just don't know where we are. So you don't have to come up with an alternative. The only desire for an alternative is because we have had faith in this heliocentric model that appears to work. And when we take that away, it can be very difficult to be left without a model, without an explanation. But really what we're dealing with here is belief and faith that some kind of perceived authority has given us the answers to those questions that we all ask. Where are we? What is this place? What are we doing here? Why are we here? The truth of the matter is that nobody knows. Nobody has the definitive answer. And again, the globe Earth, heliocentric, Big Bang model really is just a creation story. If things are spinning, something had to start them spinning. There had to be a point of creation. So even in this scientific exploration of our Earth, our place in space, there is this desire to have an answer to the why and the wherefore of creation. So it is no different to any religion. We have to have complete faith in things that we know are physically impossible and that we cannot measure and cannot observe. We have to have faith that the horizon is a curve because we have a curved Earth illustrated for us. So we are told to believe the physically impossible, that there's a curve at the horizon. And all of these things that comprise the heliocentric model are based on faith. And that is all it is. The heliocentric model was created by Catholic priests, Copernicus, with the presupposition that the sun is at the center. And then we have the Gregorian calendar created from that, a solar calendar. Whereas many people follow a lunar calendar. But those people who follow a lunar calendar don't try to dictate that it is somehow our physical reality that we are moving around the moon. It's just accepted that there is this cosmic clock in the sky that we can use to tell the time. And we can make predictions from these Earth-based observations. Lunar eclipses, solar eclipses, they're all just based on observations which are recorded, and then predictions can be made from that. No model has exclusivity to making predictions. Again, this is an argument that you often hear. The heliocentric model is the best we've got, and we can make predictions with it. No. The predictions were already made from simply keeping records on the Earth or by making observations. And it is those observations that have been translated or into an illustration of a heliocentric model. But really the globe is comprised not of measurable proof, not of physical measurements of curvature, but the translation of perspective of the observer on the ground into an imaginary curve in an orthographic view that you see here on the screen. It really is as simple as that. Perspective is the imaginary curve. Anything beyond that is hearsay, assumptions, and calculations, not measurable proof. So don't demand an alternative model from anyone who cannot go out and provide measurable proof anyway of the distance to the sun or the size of the sun, because we can't physically measure it. We cannot provide that measurable proof. We cannot in any way come up with any measurable proof of how this was all created. This goes beyond any faith, any religion, any science. So when it comes to science, stick to science and measure the substance of our reality. Any tangents, any thoughts, any ideas that go away from those physical measurements are assumptions. And you have to have faith in the cause and effect. I hope that helps for those of you who wish to have or employ discernment when it comes to discussing models. Thank you very much.